Afternoon, everyone. My name is Colin Day. I'm a financial advisor with Correct Capital Wealth Management. Those of you that are familiar with me or our firm, we are 401k financial advisors, and we do a quarterly financial wellness update where we do a webinar that we host live, and then we set the recording, we put it up on our YouTube page so that people are aware of some of the interesting things that are going on in retirement planning. So in this particular case, what we're talking about is an act that was signed into law at the very end of 2022. Those of you that are in the know might remember a little act called the Secure Act. 1.0 was passed at the end of 2019. Then the pandemic happened and everybody just kind of forgot about it. I'm kidding, of course. But then we had a resurgence in new ideas and better ways to prepare people for retirement. And Congress eventually, in a bipartisan vote, approved this particular Secure Act 2.0. So when it comes to retirement plan upgrades, we're going to talk about some of the major things that happened here. So there's lots of exciting things that we can talk about, but I wanted to go over the four most important ones that I think may affect you, if not in this year, in 2023, in the near future. So just some ground rules for this. This presentation is for you all. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat. At the very end, we'll have time for voicing questions, if that is a better way for you to communicate with me. While we're doing the presentation, if you wouldn't mind staying on mute, that'd be great from my point of view, so I'm not distracted and getting off track. So for today's conversation, and if everybody can see my screen, Alexia just popped by and asked if everybody could see it. Can someone confirm that they can see it?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, you can. Okay, great. So for today's conversation, we're going to do a quick review, Secure Act 1.0, again, the one in 2019, and then 2.0. We're going to go over four examples of how enhancements may increase retirement outlook. And then again, we'll have time at the end for questions. So Secure Act and Secure Act 2.0. The very first one, back at the very end of 2019, the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act. Man, Congress loves their acronyms. This particular act was again met with bipartisan support. So that's the most important thing that I can say here is that regardless of your political affiliation, Americans need better help and better tools at their disposal to prepare for retirement. So some of the things that were accomplished within the 1.0 would be the repealing of the age limit for contributing to a traditional IRA. It used to be 70 and a half, but no longer exists. It increased required minimum distributions, which we'll talk about in a moment, and how that changed yet again. In this case, it changed from 70 and a half years old to 72. It also got more part-time workers eligible to participate in the plan, and it changed inherited account rules. So if you inherit in a retirement account, there's different rules now as to how you need to withdraw funds over time. Now, Secure Act 2.0, again, passed with strong bipartisan support. While there were some things that were really good about 1.0, 2.0 seek to take things to the next level. What are some things that Americans need to be able to facilitate their retirements that the current legislation had in place and then 1.0 did not yet address? Both sections of Congress, Senate and the House, had different bills going through at the same time, but they basically had the exact same features. There were some slight differences. They went to committee and eventually it was passed. Now, the thing to remember here is that while I said that there was bipartisan support, a vote of 225 to 201 sure sounds like voting along party lines. And you would be correct. And the reason is because it was actually a part of the greater package for the budget for the year, for the fiscal year. So the Secure Act, along with many other bills and other acts, were attached to the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023. And so that's why, while the vote doesn't show that there was bipartisan support, there was, if you knew the history behind this particular act. Now, the important thing to remember here is that many of the things that were passed at the very end of last year are for 2023, but some of these things are a few years out, and we'll go over the years in which some of these things will come into effect. So there are four enhancements you should know. Secure Act 2.0 enhancements that I think are most important are these four right here: R&D ages, catch-up contributions, penalty-free withdrawals, and then student loan repayment. So we're going to go through each of these. So first off, like I said a moment ago, in 2019, Secure Act 1.0 started at 70 and a half years old, and it changed to 72. Now, with Secure Act 2.0, the age has changed to 73 beginning this year in 2023, and it will increase a decade from now to 75. The reason the required minimum distribution age is changing, number one, as you can imagine, Americans are living longer. When this particular provision was written years and years and decades ago, the life expectancy of Americans was a little bit lower than where it is today. The other thing is that because this branding of a 401k IRAs, so much of our retirement wealth is consolidated into these retirement plans, for many folks, they don't actually need to take money out of their accounts and they're being forced to because the IRS hasn't received tax revenue on much of the money in these retirement accounts. And they're saying, okay, it's time to pay up. So instead of waiting for you to pass away, the money to go to the beneficiaries to get the funds, they're trying to speed up the process and get that money flowing faster. But because for many folks, again, this is an unnecessary amount that they have to withdraw, which could boost up their taxes that they don't want to have to pay in the first place, that's why the age is being extended out. So here's a quick example for you as to how things are changing. So we've got Amber, we've got Paul. So Amber in 2023 is going to turn 72. Now, without Secure Act 2.0, this would be the first year for required minimum distributions. But as I just said a moment ago, it's not. Underneath 2.0, she's going to have the year 2024. So next year when she turns 73. Now we've got Paul on the right. He is going to be of the 75 age. And so he's not going to take a required minimum distribution until 2043, whereas he would have taken it under 1.0 at 2040. So this particular provision, the RMD age change, probably doesn't affect you personally, but loved ones, your parents, your grandparents that might be making withdrawals, this certainly does affect them, and it allows them to preserve a little bit more of their retirement wealth. So 2, catch-up contributions. Catch-up contributions allow those people that are turning age 50 or greater in the year to add additional sums towards their retirement accounts. There's different limits for IRAs and for 401ks, and we're concentrating on 401ks for this discussion. So previously, like in the year 2023, that limit was going to be a hard and fast $7,500. So in 2023, the minimum the maximum that you can contribute if you're under the age of 50 is $22,500. Then you can add $7,500 on top of that because you're 50 or older. So if you're 50 or older, it'd be $30,000 total. So now what they're doing is, for whatever reason, they decided there is an age band between if you're turning 60 and 63 that you can actually increase to $10,000 for your catch-up. So instead of it being like in today's dollars, $30,000, you can do an extra $2,500 on top of that. So why they decided age 60 to 63, not exactly certain, but that's what the actuary said was going to be the most meaningful time to have 4 years to be able to do this. This particular provision is not until 2025. So if you are over age 50 right now, or you're approaching age 60, this particular catch-up provision does not apply quite yet. Or if you're over age 63 or will be, unfortunately, you may miss it completely. Now, here's a downside for this. So because they're going to increase contribution limits for a certain number of years, there's a bite back here. They're clawing back some revenue that would have otherwise been missed by the IRS. If you have earned more than $145,000 in the previous year, your catch-up amount has to be Roth, not pre-tax. So for many folks, if you make over $145,000, again, fast forwarding to the year 2024 now, which is the year before 2025 when this goes into effect, if you want to make catch-up contributions towards your retirement account, you have to make that portion the Roth money. You can still do majority of your contributions pre-tax, but the catch-up portion has to be Roth. And so the idea here, again, is that they're increasing the amount that you can put in, and they're going to tax you on it. So this does allow people to put more money into the accounts, but there's more taxes to worry about. And as an example, we've got 4 different individuals. Now, Paul and Amber are going to look familiar. I did change their ages for this scenario. So we fast forwarded to 2025 when the catch-up contribution limits for that age band has increased. Now we can see they all make different sums of money over the course of a year. So like Paul, because he makes $75,000, his allowable catch-up when he's age 55 in that year is $7,500. It's very easy. He is not subject to the Roth contribution rule because he is underneath that 145 cap. Now, Ray, however, who is 59, he's still going to be at 7,500 because he's not age 60 yet, but he is subject to the Roth contribution rule because he makes over the 145. Maureen, 63, she's within the age band. She's in the last year of her age band, but she makes over the limit. So while she's able to do the 10,000, she has to contribute that 10,000 Roth. And then finally, we have Amber, she's 72, 120,000. So she's under the cap. And because she's outside of the age band, we're back to the 7,500. So I use this as an illustration. And again, probably unlikely that this affects anybody here, but we want to make sure that people understand that these are some of the things that we, as the advisors, are going to have to consult on for those of you that may be subjected to these kinds of RMD, or in this case, the catch-up rules in the future. Now, more cool things, expanded penalty-free withdrawal rules. So if somebody takes a withdrawal from their 401k before being 59.5 years old, they are generally subjected to a 10% early withdrawal penalty. There are some situations where you are not subjected to it, and common exceptions would include, for example, if you have major medical bills in your family in a year and it's over a certain percentage of your adjusted gross income, the amount that exceeds that could be eligible to be withdrawn and not be subjected to the 10% early withdrawal penalty. Or for example, if you had the IRA, you pass away, you hand it over to a loved one, say like a son or a daughter, they don't have to worry about the 10% early withdrawal because they inherited that retirement account. Disability, unfortunately, is another common consideration when we talk about the early withdrawal rule. If you are considered disabled underneath the Social Security Administration or based on the IRS definition, you don't pay the 10% penalty. Still have to pay taxes in all these scenarios, but you avoid the early withdrawal penalty. So with Secure Act 2.0, they are expanding the penalty-free withdrawal rules. So these are three that I thought were interesting to mention. This does not include all of the new penalty exceptions, but because the IRS is realizing that there's a lot of restrictions on 401k plans, they're trying to expand the availability of funds for the future. So you can see the first one there. If you are diagnosed with a terminal illness or condition that can reasonably result in death in 84 months or less, this is different from disability. You don't have to be disabled to be diagnosed with a terminal illness. So they wanted to have a particular provision in place. Obviously, this would help with things like medical expenses. If you're a victim of domestic abuse, you may withdraw the lesser of $10,000 or 50% of the vested balance. That is not coming into play until 2024. So the good news is that for those individuals that feel that they are trapped in a situation due to monetary reasons that they can't leave a relationship, the idea here is that there is an outlet, there is a way to use the retirement wealth that you built into the program to maybe allow yourself to get away from a bad situation. And then finally, the emergency withdrawal exception, it could allow for up to $1,000 per year. Now, this is a plan option. So this doesn't come into effect until next year, and your plan has to offer this as a way to take money out. Again, trying to gain accessibility to the retirement plan while you're working has been very restrictive outside of hardships or unforeseeable emergencies or loans. So this is a provision that your plan must approve, but would allow you to take up to $1,000 a year. Now, unfortunately, those those first two that I mentioned, the diagnosed with a terminal illness and then a victim of domestic abuse, those withdrawals have to be repaid within 3 years. So unfortunately, there is a clawback to say, hey, if you don't repay these amounts that you took out, you could be subjected to a 10% penalty. Now, if you are diagnosed with a terminal illness and you pass away during that time period, we need greater guidance in regards to how the IRS would interpret that situation. One might interpret it in the way to say, well, they've passed away at this point, there is no ability to repay it within the 3 years. But that's why they have these kinds of this kind of language out there to try to expand things, but then in other ways, kind of shrink it back in. Finally, student loan match. I save this one for the end because I think it could potentially be the most interesting thing that affects you all as participants in 401k plans. So not this year, next year, beginning in 2024, employers can elect to match contributions employees are making against their student loans. So we hear it all the time on our end, being financial advisors, that the ability to put money aside for retirement is restricted or at least hampered because the individual doesn't have the capacity to save because they are dealing with their debt. And whether that debt's credit cards or a mortgage or a family loan, or in this case, like a student loan, many people have this mental block that these things must be accomplished first. We have to get these off the table first before I feel comfortable doing my retirement savings. So what's interesting about this is that an individual like Sammy here, who has student loan debt, could contribute towards the student loan, but still get the employer match. So I don't have to contribute towards my retirement account to get the match any longer. If my plan approves for it, I can make my deposits over here against my student loan, doing the good thing that I should be doing, which is paying out my debts, but I can still get the credit from my employer. So Sammy, in this situation here, let's say that she has 2 job offers and she's trying to figure out which is going to be the best for her. So if she has a new employer that's offering a 3% match on her student payments, and the other one is not doing this loan repayments, how might this work in the future? How might Sammy's behavior towards saving for retirement or just managing debt in general change? So let's say Sammy's going to make $35,000 a year. Both job offers are the same. Now, if she's contributing to pay off that $25,000 loan, about $265 a month with a 5% interest rate, she wants to pay it off within 10 years. Let's assume there's no income-driven repayment here. We're just keeping the simple 10-year payback period. Employer matches 3% on the student loan contributions, and then begins contributing the $265 to her 401k once the 401k is paid, or excuse me, the student loan is paid off. So in the blue column, so this is the one where they will match on the student loan. So student loan debt, $25,000, the annual loan payment is about 9% of her salary. So if she needs to contribute, let's say 3% to get 3%, well, her employer is going to make a 401k contribution. That's that $1,050. So in 10 years from now, when Sammy has paid off her student loan in her 401k account, considering some earnings in there, $14,507.27 have matched against it. For the purposes of our conversation, ignore that 2032 and the 2052 years in parentheses. But we can see just because the employer is able to match on her $35,000 a year at 3%, we attribute a 7% annual growth rate to that. We have now 5 figures already in her 401k plan before she herself has put $1 into this. In 30 years, we can see how massive that grows, $2.25 million. On the other side, Sammy focuses only on the student loan debt. She's not contributing to the 401k plan. So she's still putting in the amount towards the student loan to get it knocked out in 10 years. But fast forward 10 years to, what would this be, 2033? She has $0 in the 401k because it's neither she or the employer put money in. But because she is going to start to contribute and the employer will match after 10 years, that's how we get to that $173,000. So I could tell you, and you probably would have surmised, well, of course, Colin, I'm going to have more money on the matching component than not. But we can see that difference there, that 10-year difference makes a huge difference. I mean, it's a $50,000 difference there in terms of contributions towards contributions and then compounding growth on the investments. That's really why Congress has put this particular provision into the Secure Act, and why I think many employers might be interested in putting something like that together. So to wrap things up from the presentation side before we get into questions, we think about these enhancements in many different ways. These 4 of many were the most pertinent and I think the most interesting for you to think about. So remember that your RMD ages are changing. Everything is getting pushed back. If you're in your 20s, probably going to get pushed back again, because the reality is that it's only going to continue to move back. Fingers crossed, we're all living longer in the United States. So I would imagine that we'll see another change in the future. Just know that never anything that is written in stone really isn't. Catch-up contributions, we've got that age band. So if you're between 60 and 63, a few years from now, you might have the ability to contribute more if you're used to doing the catch-up. Just remember, a couple of years from now, you might be required to do a Roth contribution. The expanded penalty-free withdrawal rules basically just means when you're in a financial situation where you think you might need to withdraw money from your 401k plan, contact an advisor, contact your record keeper, tell them a little bit about your story, and they might be able to help you find a way to get money out and not have to pay the penalty. And then finally, that student loan match. Again, this is a plan-specific provision, so your plan has to offer it, but it could provide a very good way for those people that feel saddled with debt to have the opportunity to save for retirement. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to take a quick drink of water. My contact information is on here. So if anything has triggered, any kind of thought that you want to talk about in person or via Zoom or by phone, just let me know. I'll be happy to have a conversation with you. John Biedenstein and Alexia Keel are also two good resources for you if you have general questions as well. So I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to take a drink and I'm going to check the chat in just a moment to see what questions, if any, we have. So how do we get this started from Steve? So when it comes to a lot of these provisions, some of them are just automatically focused, but there were a couple things that I mentioned in there, like the early withdrawal, the 10% penalty, that $1,000 amount that you might be able to take without incurring the 10%, or a bigger thing to consider would be like the student loan match. Probably the best thing you can do is to talk to the people that control your 401k plan. We as the advisors can give feedback to the employers to let them know, hey, we heard from so-and-so, and they said that the student loan match could be a valuable thing to add in the near future. We should maybe consider doing that. But it means a lot more when the employee says it to them than it does from the advisor. And the reason is because you're living in their world. You can relate yourself to others that might be in the same situation. The more people that bring up these types of enhancements, the more likely it's going to be a conversation of how do we get this started for you all. So we want to make sure that it's really being directed from you and making sure that when you have these conversations with the people that are in charge of the 401k plan, and that could be payroll, it could be HR, it could be your CFO, depends on the organization. You could ask around if you don't know exactly who to talk to, but those conversations that you have directly with your employer are the most meaningful. That's the way that you move the needle, so to speak, in getting things like these enhancements enacted. Great question. What other questions do we have? And again, if you're comfortable, you can unmute your mic. Cheryl asks, when you withdraw from your 401k, is it taxed as income or would it be different, assuming you are over age 59? So Cheryl, the way that withdrawals work from retirement accounts, and this is the same thing for like a traditional IRA as another example, as with a 401k, that money is included as income. So it's called ordinary income, in fact. Just like your W-2, tax brackets, what they are currently 10, 12, 22, 24, et cetera, and so forth. Those are the brackets that will affect you there. So anything that you take from your account gets added onto your income. So if you've got $100,000 in your 401k and decide to just cash it out in all 1 year, you're going to move up brackets pretty quickly because you're taking it all out in 1 year. So just be cognizant of the fact that it is taxed at your tax brackets. Thank you. What other questions do we have? Keith, death of a parent this year. I'm sorry for that. I received 2 rollover investment accounts, a TOD and an IRA. They're going to be an RMD for me. Ooh, Keith, get into contact with me. Send me a note. Let's find a time to discuss that, because this is a little bit more of a heady conversation. Now, the types of accounts that are affected by a required minimum distribution are retirement accounts. So a TOD is not a retirement account. So there wouldn't be an RMD on that source, but the IRA likely does. Depending on the age of the parent that passed away, they may have an RMD already outstanding for this year or last year that needs to be satisfied. And then there's ongoing withdrawal rules. So that's a little bit, that's going to be a better conversation for us to have one-on-one. So if you do have time, feel free to send me an email. We'll find a time to chat about it. Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions. So thank you so much for joining me on likely your lunch break or close to it. If you do have follow-up for me, again, my contact information is on the screen. This will be a video on our YouTube page. So if you type in Correct Capital Wealth Management into YouTube, it'll pop up there probably sometime next week. I will also send the links out to the plan representatives from which you received the invite in the first place. So if you know anybody that needs to look at it, you can feel free to forward it on once you receive it there. No other questions? Okay, I don't see anything else. Thank you so much for joining me today. Wish you nothing but great health, great weather, wherever you are. Thank you.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. As always, please remember, investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Correct Capital Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor. advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Correct Capital Wealth Management and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advice may be rendered by Correct Capital Wealth Management unless a client service agreement is in place.